There comes a moment in your life, quiet, subtle, almost embarrassing in its simplicity, when you look around and realize something is shifting. Not dramatically, not violently, just undeniably. And it starts with this one small sentence: I can't keep being available like this. You don't announce it out loud. You barely admit it to yourself, but you feel it, like a tiny crack forming in the mask you've worn your entire life. Because if you're here, watching this, then you know exactly what it means to have built your identity around being reachable, responsive, always ready. You've been the person who answers quickly, adjusts easily, bends quietly, forgives rapidly, and endures patiently. You grew up believing that your availability is your value, and your consistency is your currency, and your compliance is your character. You learned, somewhere along the line, that being needed was the closest thing you had to being loved. But here's the paradox. The very trait that once protected you, the trait that made you reliable, admired, indispensable, is the same trait that has been draining you, diminishing you, and slowly dismantling you from the inside. Because the thing about being endlessly available is that it trains the world to stop asking whether you should be it conditions people to treat your time, your energy, your emotional labor as if they're part of the public domain. And then one day, when you finally start stepping back, when you begin honoring the boundaries you should have had all along, everything changes. People you once rescued feel abandoned. People you once prioritized feel offended. People who used to take comfort in your yes grow suspicious of your no. But the biggest shift isn't external, that it's internal, that it's the shock of hearing your own voice again, that it's the awkwardness of no longer betraying yourself for connection. It's the panic of no longer earning affection through self-erasure. When you stop being available, you don't just confront other people's disappointment. You confront your own fear of becoming unlovable. And that's what we're really talking about today. Not boundaries, not time management, not self-care, but the psychological unraveling that occurs when the survival strategy you depended on your whole life no longer works. That let's name what's happening here. With clinical precision and metaphorical depth, the archetype behind chronic availability is rooted in fawning behavior. A trauma response where self-sacrifice becomes a means of securing connection and avoiding conflict. That it's the nervous system's attempt to maintain safety by becoming pleasing, agreeable, and indispensable. Point 3 core psychological principles shape this pattern. 1. Fawning response, trauma psychology. Unlike fight, flight, or freeze, fawning is the reflexive need to become useful as a form of protection. Your body learned that anger from others was dangerous, withdrawal was devastating, and disappointment was unbearable. So you avoided these threats the only way you could, by becoming perpetually accessible. You became hyper-attuned to the emotional needs of others. You predicted their moods, solved their problems, absorbed their tension. Your availability wasn't kindness, it was armor. Point 2. Enmeshment and boundary erosion in many childhood or early relational systems. Your identity becomes fused with the needs of others. This is known as enmeshment, where you're not allowed to have a self separate from the people around you. You learn to survive by shrinking yourself until you fit into everyone else's expectations. Your preferences blur, your desires dissolve, your boundaries fade. The result? Availability becomes not just something you do, but something you are. Chronic availability rewires the brain's default stress patterns. Neurobiologically, your sympathetic nervous system becomes activated not by danger, but by the possibility of disappointing someone. Your heart races at unread messages. Your chest tightens at missed calls. You feel guilt in your body before it forms in your mind. This is a rewired internal alarm system. You don't respond quickly because you want to. You respond quickly because your body believes it must. And here's where the metaphor comes in. You're like a house that installed all its smoke detectors inside the living room instead of the kitchen. Everything sets them off. A raised eyebrow. A delayed response. A side. So you become available not out of generosity, but out of anticipatory fear. But when you start undoing this system, when you pull back, when you go quiet, when you let a message sit unread, that old alarm system begins screaming. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something new. Let's talk about the emotional price. Because it's far higher and far older than you realized. There's a grief that comes with being constantly available. A grief you don't talk about because you've normalized it. A grief that settles deep in your bones. It's the grief of never having been chosen for who you are, only for what you provide. It's the pain of realizing that your kindness was mistaken for consent and your reliability mistaken for limitless capacity. You lived your entire life in service to other people's comfort, and here's the philosophical truth. When you make yourself endlessly available, you make yourself invisible. You become background scenery, comforting, reliable, predictable, but not truly seen. The philosopher Kierkegaard once wrote, "The greatest threat to authenticity is the desire to please." And this is exactly the trap you've been caught in. You traded authenticity for acceptance. You traded boundaries for belonging. You traded your voice for validation. And the core fear driving all of this is simple. The fear that if you stop being available, you stop being loved. Because for years, people didn't choose you. They chose access to you. And access became your identity. So when you pull back, when you rest, when you stop performing emotional labor for free, you're not just breaking a pattern. That you're facing the existential fear that without your usefulness, you might be nothing. This is the silent, invisible grief, the grief of the unchosen self. So how does this appear in adulthood? What does it actually look like to be someone who built their personality around availability and is now trying to undo it? Let's map it clearly. Point 1. You apologize for being busy, even when your unavailability is completely reasonable. You say sorry before you say hello. Your instinct is guilt, not presence. Point 2. You keep your phone on loud, even though you hate it. That you're terrified of missing something important. That a message left unread feels like a moral failing. Point 3. You resent people for asking for things, then feel guilty for the resentment. This is the emotional whiplash of someone who has always said yes at the cost of themselves. Point 4. You attract people who love your availability, but not your boundaries. The moment you stop being convenient, they withdraw. Their affection was conditional on your compliance. Point 5. You struggle to rest without justification. You can only relax if you've earned it. Idleness feels like danger. Your body doesn't recognize peace unless it's preceded by exhaustion. Point 6. You feel intense discomfort when someone treats you with the same level of care you give them. Reciprocity feels foreign. Receiving feels threatening. Support feels suspicious. These aren't personality traits. They're coping strategies you built to survive a world that punished your needs and rewarded your self-abandonment. And the unlearning process is brutal, because it requires you to witness your own pain without minimizing it. Say to yourself, I am tired because I was never allowed to rest. To acknowledge, I wasn't overreacting, I was overfunctioning. Unlearning means letting the guilt rise without obeying it, letting the fear speak without believing it, letting the old identity dissolve without rushing to replace it. It means understanding that not being available isn't selfish. It's self-repair. Oh, what does healing look like? It's not dramatic. It's not loud. That it's not a personality overhaul. That it's small, uncomfortable acts of self-ownership repeated consistently over time. Point 1. Inner child reparenting. You learn to tell the younger version of yourself, you don't have to earn your worth. You validate the child who believed love required labor. You reassure the child who thought silence meant failure. Point 2. Nervous system regulation. You teach your body that rest is not danger, that slowness is not disrespect, that unread messages are not emergencies. You retrain your system to feel safe without constant performance. Point 3. Shadow work on the unavailable self. You explore the parts of yourself you buried. The angry part, the tired part, the part that needed space, the part that wanted boundaries. You integrate these shadows instead of exiling them. Point 4. Practicing micro-boundaries. You start small. Respond later. Say, I can't make it. Let the phone ring. Take a day without explanations. Each act chips away at the old identity. Point 5. Choosing softness, not softness toward others, softness toward yourself. Gentle self-permission, gentle self-kindness, gentle self-acceptance. You learn softness not as vulnerability, but as liberation. And maybe the most profound part is this. When you stop being available, you finally meet the version of yourself that's been waiting underneath all that obligation. The self that is not shaped by expectation. The self that is not performing for acceptance. The self that is not terrified of disappointing everyone. This journey isn't about becoming less caring. It's about caring without collapsing, loving without losing, giving without disappearing. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And this moment, this shift, this unraveling, is the beginning of that becoming. You're not losing yourself by being less available. You're recovering yourself by being more truthful. So if this resonates, if this feels like your story, if this feels like a quiet revolution happening inside you, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming whole. If this spoke to you, share it, comment on it, subscribe. Not because you owe me anything, but because this is how we build a community of people reclaiming their time, their boundaries, and their sense of self. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing yourself. And thank you for taking the first step into a life where your worth isn't measured by your availability, but by your authenticity.